Speculation. Speculation is to deem two matters possible, while one of them is more apparent than the other, according to the speculator. Or we could use the word supposition, to suppose. According to the speculator, so that means that speculation is relative, not absolute. That's different from knowledge. Knowledge is absolute, because knowledge is knowing something as it is. The information conveyed by one person does not necessitate knowledge. So this is where speculation is relevant in the science of hadith. The information conveyed by one person does not necessitate knowledge. Rather, if it fulfills the conditions, it necessitates application. Hence, if the chains of the hadiths narrated about purification, prayer, fasting, hajj, and zakah, and the like were sahih, it would be obligatory to apply them. As for whether the Prophet said them or not, this is not definite knowledge. Why? Because it's possible for the truthful one to tell a lie. So, if it's narrated through one person, it doesn't necessitate knowledge, because it's possible that the truthful one would lie. And it's possible that the accurate one would be mistaken. So when you have someone who's truthful and accurate, then what do? You apply what was conveyed to you. And you might think that it's true. If you don't have this knowledge here that we're going over, you might think you have knowledge from the report of one person. Let's say, for example, your mother came and said, "I've been robbed." What would you think? Now, each one of you have your own mother, so that's relative, really. But generally speaking, I think it's safe to assume that most people would probably believe that if their mother came and said, "I've been robbed." Now, if a person doesn't have this knowledge we're talking about here, he wouldn't realize that he doesn't have a definitive knowledge. Rather, what he has is a dhann, a speculation. He thinks it's true. And that's valid to think it's true. That's valid to think it's true. But what's not valid is to claim that you know with definitive knowledge that it's true, because you don't know with definitive knowledge. Because the information, that's a rule, the information conveyed by one person does not necessitate knowledge. As for whether the Prophet said them or not, this is not definite knowledge. Rather, all the clues point to, all the clues indicate that he did say it, and so we're taking that. That's what it means. Also, what a mujtahid has when he makes his ijtihad is a speculation, a dhann. He thinks he's right based on all of his evidence, and he thinks the other is wrong. When a person thinks according to this, though, then he will have stronger reasoning, because it's easier for him to consider his own mistake. Maybe he is wrong. Maybe one is wrong when he doesn't have definitive knowledge. Doubt. The slightest uncertainty about the belief in Allah or His Messenger is blasphemy. This is not what is meant when Al-Ra'ini said, doubt is to deem two matters possible without one being more evident than the other, according to the doubter. So also the doubt is relative, not absolute. So I might have a strong speculation about that which you doubt, because the proofs, we don't gauge the proofs the same. Even if we have the same proofs, that doesn't mean we're gauging them the same. Like if I rely on a narrator and you don't, or if I interpret a word one way and you interpret it in another way. And so the equal uncertainty about the confirmation or negation of Zayd's standing is doubt, according to the jurists, not according to the theologians. For the jurists, doubt is 50-50. Neither side is more apparent. If one of the two possibilities became more probable, then it is speculation or dhann or supposition. And the fancy is the unlikely possibility. That's the correct word there, fancy. It's just a fancy, a whim. So then it should be clear for you that we're talking about having a scale. Two pans. How do you weigh? Are the pans equal? If so, then you have a doubt, according to the jurists, not according to the theologians. So if the right side is correct and the left side is incorrect, then which one is heavier for you? If the right side goes down, then you have speculation, dhann. You think that's correct. That's what's heavy for you. That's weighty. If the left side goes down, then you have a fancy. It's probably wrong to you. That's the unlikely possibility. But probably wrong doesn't mean definitely wrong, right? So some homeless person or apparently homeless person, he gives you a sad story of why he needs you to give him money. And he looks like he's on drugs. You hear his story and then you decide not to give him money. Why? Because his story for you was unlikely for you, but it could be absolutely true. When you looked into the clues for yourself, you weren't convinced, so you didn't think that it was true. Ignorance. Simple ignorance is the mere lack of knowledge of something, such as our lack of knowledge of what is under the seven earths, or what is in the depth of the seas. So, if you know what you don't know, if you know what you don't know, then you'll have a good, clean knowledge, inshallah. Misconception is to conceive something differently from how it is in reality. Like to conceive the human as a creature that neighs, that's the sound of the horse, or the realization of the philosophers that the world is eternal, or the realization of the bodifiers that Allah has a body, the likeners. Delusion and imagination. Only a body with certain limits, volume, and color can be imagined, because the imagination is based on what one can or has encountered. One only imagines what is familiar, what his senses have encountered. He can see or hear something, he can encounter something by his senses, and then in his imagination he can manipulate that. But he cannot imagine something that he has never experienced in any way whatsoever. Anything that one imagined is based on what he has sensed. The illusion or imagination is a direct result of the senses. The illusion or imagination, we're using those synonymously. The illusion or imagination is a direct result of the senses. The delusion does not stand as proof for the validity of a matter. Also this one. Illusion, delusion, imagination. We're using these here synonymously. The condition for the validity of a matter is that the mental judgments stand as proof. So for example, someone went to his friend's house, saw the light is on, and the car is outside. So what did he assume? He assumed that his friend was home. So if he really believed definitively in his heart that his friend was home based on seeing the light on and the car outside, then He judged by imagination, not by evidence. He could have a van. He could take that as an indication. So he might think strongly. He might say, look, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Your light's on. Your car's outside. So he might say, I know you're home. Here, if one has internalized this knowledge that we're reading here, then when he says, in this case, I know you're home, it means I believe strongly, and that's valid. You can say, I know, with the meaning of, I believe that this is true, although it could be false. Because that's how clear the evidence is for me. And that's in the book of Allah, when Allah says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا جاءكم المؤمنات مهاجرات فامتحنوهن الله أعلم بإيمانهن فإن علمتموهن مؤمنات فلا ترجعوهن إلى الكفار. O you who believed, if the believing women have come to you as immigrants, yani they escaped Mecca and came to Medina, then test them. Allah knows best about their belief. فَإِنْ عَلِمْتُمُوهُنَّ مُؤْمِنَاتٍ, and if you knew them to be believers, which you can't know with definitive knowledge because we are unable to be aware of what's in the hearts. So that means if you think they are based on you're testing them, then do not return them to the blasphemers. So you can use the word know with the meaning of thinking strongly, having a strong conviction about something, or being convinced about the truthfulness of something that you don't have for it definitive knowledge. So only a body with certain limits, volume, and color can be imagined, because the imagination is based on what one can or has encountered. One only imagines what is familiar. The illusion or imagination is a direct result of the senses. The delusion does not stand as proof for the validity of a matter. The condition for the validity of a matter is that the mental judgments stand as proof. The mental judgment. The creed is not based on delusion or imagination. Rather, it is by what the sound mind, which is a witness for the religion, dictates. There's a quote that I need to put in here, and now I'm glad that I remembered it. Yes, which is that some scholars said few people escape the mistake of delusion. Few people escape the mistake of delusion. That means most people will follow an imagination or a delusion. Yani, an assumption. Most people will follow an assumption. What are some examples also of illusion? Here, I'll give you a case where illusion is not synonymous to imagination. Like, if you look into a reflection and see yourself bigger, like wider or thinner, or you look into a small mirror and see the vastness of the sky in a small mirror. Those are illusions. Also, what we look at on our screens, on our monitors, those are all illusions. The movies and those things are illusions. And really, we watch Jurassic Park or King Kong or something. There's no big monkey or dinosaurs, etc., doing the things that appear. When the sun sets at the seashore, it looks as if the sun is dipping into the ocean. That's an illusion. Or if you saw a road disappearing into the distance, it looks like the two edges of the road converge and touch. That's an illusion because they're not touching. And if you want, you can Google optical illusions. And there are many, many optical illusions. And one place where it's important to know about optical illusions, one case is when people talk about the Qibla and they bring a picture, an image of a circle that has lines on it that are supposed to be, these lines represent latitude and longitude. So there's a circle drawn on a page, and there are lines drawn on this circle that represent latitude and longitude. So when a person is not guided in this issue, he really sees that as a sphere, as a three-dimensional. They say this is a 3D picture. It's not three-dimensional. It's a circle, a drawn circle with lines over it. It's not a real sphere. And then, so that itself is an illusion because it looks like it's a sphere, but it's not. That's an illusion. And then, yani, based on that illusion, they go. They base things on that illusion and tell you, therefore, Qibla is northeast. The creed is not based on delusion or imagination. Rather, it is by what the sound mind, which is a witness for the religion, dictates. Imam Abul-Qaasim al-Ansari, the explainer of Al-Irshad by Imam al-Haramain, said, the way to reach the realization of knowable things is evidence, not delusion. The confirmation of many a matter is reached by the mind, while the imagination is disabled from it. Then we skipped a little bit of what he said there. Furthermore, we say the single indivisible particle is not imaginable, while being rational. It is rational that there is a single indivisible particle, but you cannot imagine such a thing. It's rational based on the evidence. Now I'm not going to go into that. And likewise, the single indivisible moment of time. You cannot imagine that. But it is rational, as well as eternity, existence without a beginning, is rational, but you cannot imagine it. And everlastingness is rational, but you cannot imagine it. Then we skipped some of what he said. As well, whoever wants to imagine the heavens and earth, for example, is unable to imagine except some of it. Yani, rationally, he conceives, he knows that there is a totality for heavens and earth. Intellectually, but his imagination is unable to conjure up that totality. Equally is imagining the endless things known to Allah and the endless things under His power. That's rational, but you cannot imagine that. Subhanallah, just look at how many faces Allah created. And even some faces are identical, which is also mind-blowing. Either way, it's mind-blowing. You see two people with the same face, it blows your mind. It doesn't blow your mind to see people with different faces, but if you think about how many different faces there are, that will blow your mind. The endless things under the power of Allah. Hence, since the imagination is removed from many existing things, how would the Eternal One, the Glorified, be sought by it? The one whom the creations do not resemble. Therefore, He, the Glorified, is not imagined in the delusions, because nothing is imagined except an image, and nothing is measured except that which is limited, etc. Until the end of his quote. The basis of the Muslim creed is not an illusion, because the illusion judges matters that are not seen according to what has been seen. Like the example I gave you, the person saw the light on, the car's outside, and it's 1 o'clock a.m. I don't like saying in the morning because really that's the night. 1 o'clock at night. So then he judges that his friend is home. doesn't have really an evidence though. The illusion causes one to imagine things without proof. For example, the delusion concludes that Allah exists in a place. As for the sound mind, it dictates that Allah exists without a place. Some scholars said that the one who uses his intellect without using the revelation is like the one who steps into the darkness with his eyes opened. And the one who uses the revelation without using his mind is like the one who steps into the light with his eyes closed. As for the people who deny the attributes of Allah, they did not learn the proper rules for using their minds. The Mu'tazila, that is. Rather, they are sickened by philosophy. They took what those old philosophers said and they developed it and built on it. The danger of the Mu'tazila faction lies in the fact that they claim that they rely on the mental judgment, that their sayings are supported by the judgment of the mind. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdihi.